Journeys is your go-to podcast for all things creativity. I'm your co-host, Dave Petrosky, chair of the Communication, Media, and Screen Studies Department.
And I am your co-host, Melanie Odive, Venezuelan designer and educator. This is the podcast about creativity, what it is in its many forms, and how we can become more creative in our everyday lives.
Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of Creative Journeys.
Welcome, everyone. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Melanie. How you doing?
Good, and you?
Good. We have our, we're delighted to have our next guest, Jess Gregory, who is in the Ed Leadership Department. Your chair.
I am chair at
yes.
Leadership and Policy Studies.
Excellent. So we usually get started with a little bit of an intro, but we have our guests introduce themselves a little bit. So
Yes.
let us know about you.
Yeah, so Joseph, let us know a little bit about you. And then for anybody that's not familiar with the work that you do, if you could just give us a short intro as well on that.
So, all right. So I'm Jess. I definitely prefer that to Dr. Gregory. And in my day job, I train people to be leaders, mostly in Connecticut schools, principals, any other school leader under superintendent, and people who are earning their doctorates. I coach them in how to join the academy. And
he's a fantastic coach.
Well. I've had 3 students graduate this semester.
Nice.
So that's kind of awesome. And their work, I think, is going to make schools better. And that's awesome.
Well, yeah, and I think if I'm not wrong, this is one of two or three doctoral programs that we have at the university.
This is the first doctoral program.
This was the first one
on the university's campus, and now I believe we have 4, and they're working on a 5th.
Oh, wow! I'm behind the times. I thought there was only 3.
I thought there was only 3 too.
But okay, that's great. Wow.
Oh, I know what the 4th one is. Not going to mention it.
Okay. That's good.
It's wonderful.
This isn't a promotional thing.
Yeah.
I think it's really exciting that you're talking about, basically helping to train leaders and that kind of stuff. There's a certain amount of, it's an interesting position because leadership quite frequently intersects with creativity in a lot of different ways, right? So you're in a position of helping leaders sort of recognize their leadership creativity, I guess.
Absolutely.
Right.
And also see themselves as leaders.
Right.
And not replicate the same things that we know don't work.
Right.
Even though, like when you're stressed, you go back to the way you learned.
Right.
And so my goal is to help them develop their own capacities so that they don't do that. Because we know what that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work for Connecticut schools. So if I can help them build that confidence and build their toolkit so that even when they're wicked stressed, they don't go to that, then it's a win.
Yeah. I think part of, we've talked about this before, that part of, what we've talked about in terms of our, educational approaches and things, we're trying to help students sort of discover themselves, right, and try to build their professional identities and that kind of stuff. And it's a little bit different for a doctoral program because I think when we're talking about undergraduates, we're talking about folks that might not really have thought about their future at all. Or they might just be starting to think about their future. But somebody that's in a doctoral program is making a very purposeful decision about their career trajectory and what they're looking for and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's more similar than you'd think.
I was just going to say that.
When I taught 11th grade chemistry and 10th graders and 9th graders and they had to do their science fair project, they struggled to come up with the ideas. I've also worked with doctoral students who have struggled to come up with the ideas because they're going to be living with this. Now in high school, they're living with it for a few months. In the doctoral program, they're living with it for a few years. So the stakes are a little higher, but the same thing holds, is that you need to find something that you're curious about, but you also can live with for an extended amount of time.
Right.
I was just thinking before our conversation started how interesting was going to be the comparison of our previous conversations about undergraduate students and how the conversation was going to shift talking about doctoral students. But just hearing you make that comment, Dave, I immediately switched my hat to the doctoral student persona and very quickly realized, no, if I put my student hat on, we share the similar struggles and similar conflicts of what am I doing?
Right.
Why am I doing this? What did I get myself into?
But then even when you finish, there's such a great risk of the imposter syndrome where you think everyone can see through you, like you've done this work, but you don't feel like the expert, but you are literally the expert.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And, I've found and, this is sort of a thing that, folks have talked about for a long time is that, you're never as up to date and expert-like as when you first finish your doctoral.
When you defend.
So when
Absolutely.
you defend, right? You're the expert. Like you're the one that knows that information better than anybody else. And, it's a sort of a downhill slide from there.
That's not important to the story.
We're not going to, we don't want to undermine our own credibility here. But
no, but every project you're working on, like you sort of re-awesomeize that in yourself.
Yeah.
When you're doing your dissertation, you're developing those skills.
Right.
But every time you do a research project, you're drawing from that and you're becoming an expert on this new inquiry, this new question you have.
Yeah. And I think that that's, part of, the ongoing struggle that we all have, as faculty members is like trying to, sort of reconcile that, especially with, a lot of our attention is focused on how other people are going through that experience. But what we don't necessarily want to acknowledge or actively acknowledge is the fact that we're going through that simultaneously with the students.
Yeah, it's a vulnerability.
Yeah.
So when I was teaching a class, I felt entirely unqualified to teach qualitative methods. As a quant jock, someone whose love language is math, when I got assigned to teach qualitative methods, the first thing was I called the chair like, wait, what? Why are you giving me this class? Like I'm a numbers person. So I was like, all right, deep breath. Okay. Just treat this like another body of knowledge. How do you go about this? And so I thought the best way I could teach my students is to walk through a project with them and just stay a week, 2 weeks ahead of them, doing a project in parallel with them. And so essentially, I created a qualitative research project so that I could model all the steps. And by the end of the semester, I had submitted an article that I could then share with the class. Like, this is the same work you're doing for your dissertation. It's the same steps that I did to create an article for publication.
I think that's an awesome example, right?
And it talks about things that I think we were even talking about this in our last conversation too, how sometimes it's good for the students to have that experience of the professor also experiencing the project, giving it a try, trying it out, or trying something new with softwares, right? Teaching software with AI. We're learning as we go the same way that our students are learning this new tool.
Right. Like I'm teaching a class on AI Wednesday nights for OWL, the Office of Workforce and Lifelong Learning. And every time I teach the class, AI has developed. Yeah. And so the content can't be the same because it's developed. So something that didn't, that's what you mean about kicking the table. Every time you teach it, the AI has developed. So something that didn't work last time I taught it, now all of a sudden is working on 2 different platforms. And the first platform's now charging you. So, okay, well, that one's out. So now let's look at these other ones that are free.
Right. And I think that one of the things that, and I do want to come back to AI because I know that you are pretty heavily immersed in discussions about AI and that kind of stuff. And it's something that I'm definitely
and we know not to use it to do bios.
Right. Yes, because we know that does not work, or at least it works only like 25% of the time.
Very true.
Because
Although
Almost everybody has.
this one was the first one that was completely wrong.
Right.
Yeah, it was
right.
pretty
That's
much
true.
garbage.
100%
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. That was. Yeah. Yeah.
It had my name right.
Yeah, well, that's I spelled it correctly, so that was good. But one of the things that I'm also I've been interested in is the idea of students being in transition and sort of thinking about education as a liminal experience, right? Where they're not. And the way that I kind of think about it is, where the students are coming in as not having a particular set of knowledge, and they're trying to get to the place where they have knowledge. But
Right.
in that
Like
middle
pedagogy versus andragogy.
yes, exactly, and that sort of middle space is okay. So what am I if I'm in the middle of that? Like, what
No,
am
but
I
it's
in the
different. Like my students
Yeah.
during the day are experts.
Right.
Right? They
right,
are
that's-
100% experts in their content areas as educators. Like
Right.
they are experts. And then they have to totally code switch when they transitioned into student mode. And for some people, that's a lot harder than for others.
Absolutely.
And so, recognizing as adult learners that you want to welcome that wisdom into the space
Yeah.
and create the experiences so that they can share that wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and then learn from each other, because we're not all we don't have the same expertise.
Mm-hmm.
But if you create the space so that they can all still be experts and be learners.
Right, right, and I think that that's such an important distinction if we start to talk about differences between the undergraduate experience and the graduate experience. I mean, that's one of the sort of the markers, I think, is that. We start to, as educators, we start to teach the students as peers more so than as, exclusively, sort of a hierarchical kind
Yeah.
of knowledge base. Like we
Right.
know and they don't and that kind of
Right.
stuff.
We walked the path before them.
Right.
But they're on the same path.
Right, right. So I think that's like really an important distinction, and I hadn't necessarily thought it through entirely, but one of the things that is very interesting to me is how that whole conversation gets complicated by the imposter syndrome,
And ego.
right? And yes, very
Huge.
much so. Yeah.
Like if my ego's fragile, then I don't create that same environment
Right.
for my students because I am invested in being seen as the single expert.
Right.
Right? If I let go of that and I just care about the experience that we're all having in this classroom community, then we don't have to deal with that. My ego's
Right.
not in the way.
Right.
And it's interesting because, as a Latina, you would have thought that I do a lot of code switching as I've been growing up in this country and learning different customs, but I didn't really understand the term until I became a doctoral student.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I was code switching immediately, just leaving my students and then walking across campus to put my student hat. And I didn't realize that at all until we were talking about it in class one day from the Latino perspective. And I was like, oh, wait, that is what I'm doing right now. And I didn't know that there was a term for it. You would have thought that I knew the term by now. But it was completely new to me. And it's so...
Be nicer to my friend Melanie.
But it is so interesting how hard it is to let go of that imposter syndrome and then remembering that I am an expert. I was an expert for 8-9 hours just now, but I am receiving so much new information and so much knowledge. I just need to let go of that and just be a little sponge for a few hours and take this information in and see how it sort of complements what I already know, what my expertise is, and how it just makes it grow instead of just trying to stay on with that imposter syndrome, because sometimes it can take over you.
Do you also then have the ability to bring some of that sponginess, that spongitude back to the first 8-9 hours?
Yes.
Right? It totally shifts that when you recognize your dual status as continual learner and expert.
Yes, and
It makes everything so
I
much
share it with
richer.
my students too. I would say like the first year, I struggle with it. Year 2, I talk with the students and I'm just like, I'm a student too. So think about when I do this, when I have my deadlines, I have my assignments, I'm here with you now, and I have to go finish a paper myself. And I share my own experiences with them. And I honestly think it lets them see me more as a peer. It lets them see me more as like, I'm not at the top, even though I am. And it makes me connect with them.
Because it's relational. And then you're not using legitimate power as much as you're using relational power.
Yes.
Because now they know you care, you understand that experience, and you're in this journey together, and you're the shepherd. You're not the boss, but you're helping to make sure that they go down a path that's going to help them achieve what they want to.
Yeah, exactly like
Right.
that. Even
Right.
silly little
Yeah.
things like I have spoken with a student at 2:30 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, I don't do that. I'm
She
asleep.
was working on her project for me, and I was working on a paper for class. And she just messaged me, not thinking that I was in the computer working. And it was a very long message. And it ended with like, I hope that I didn't like rant too much. And it was just so long that I felt the need to answer at the time. And I'm like, let's not make this a habit. I just happen to be working right now, but I felt like I needed to address your message, and just I gave her some feedback, and I just told her, just go to sleep.
I think that's really funny. I think that's also something that I put a lot of thought into, is just that whole idea of sort of getting into this sort of mentor kind of peer mode with students. Like some students are they're not up to that as a challenge. They want somebody to just tell them what is, especially undergraduates. Not so much. I mean, sometimes because I have taught some grad classes, and you get those students every once in a while. They're like, oh, I don't know what direction to go at all. But what I find is that if I can introduce something that's sort of new or different that I'm trying to figure out at the same time as them, then it equalizes that playing field, and it makes that discussion a little bit easier for all of us to manage when we're figuring it out simultaneously. Like I remember back years ago when I first started to use wikis in the classroom, right? And folks were like, "Oh, what do you use this for? And what's this world? This Wikipedia thing? And it's what a piece of junk and blah blah blah." And I was like, "Well, that's I think there might be something there. Let me investigate this." And I tried to use it in the classroom, and what that did, it sort of changed the dynamic, so that we were having conversations about, well, how can we figure this out together, and how do we and I think that's sort of the challenge that we have moving forward, especially when when we have students with a wide range of experience.
Sure.
Right. And how do we make it so that, we're teaching a class, but we have some people that are at a very high level of expertise or very, self-confident and certain about things. And then we have another group that's, just sort of, getting started or just trying to figure out their way. And how do we make that into an experience that we're all going to
But
have?
how does this person who has this level of confidence, how do you get them to open up to being curious? Because they've got all this confidence. And so it's getting them to a space where they're curious without assaulting their ego.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And one of the things, part of the conversation, I think that's somewhat productive, although it doesn't always work, is just, pull them into a troubleshooting process, have them kind of become, sort of the conspirators for the class, right? And here's, that's a strategy, right? It's not foolproof
No,
by
I
any
use
means,
the
but
discussion of the Dunning-Kruger effect,
mm-hmm.
where you're most confident about the things you know the least about.
Right.
And once you have this level of expertise, you know how much you don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that discussion of the Dunning-Kruger effect allows people to inspect their own confidences without calling them out on it.
Right.
And so,
well, and I think that that's like a sort of a big, that's a big transition in the undergraduate experience. Like that's, when I talk to advisees about, they'll say, well, okay, what's the difference between undergraduate and graduate school?
Mm-hmm.
And, like when you're an undergraduate, you have this degree of certainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this sort of self-confidence and then you get into grad school. And then you start to learn more, and then you realize, well, maybe
holy
I don't.
fluff, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know anything.
And it sort of really tilts the apple cart completely.
Right. Well, and some programs do that intentionally, like undergraduate physics. Your first semesters are all Newtonian physics, right? And this is all like ruled by beautiful math, right? And then you go beyond that early physics level to all this uncertainty.
Yeah.
And it's basically like, yeah, there's no such thing as a point mass. Like, that math doesn't actually work. And you're like, but I just learned all that math.
Yeah. Jess, I want to talk about a little bit more about your background, because I know you're a math lover.
I do.
And I found it interesting how, like, I'm a graphic designer. I've always been a graphic designer. In high school, I decided that's what I want to do. So I've had a very linear path, and a lot of people don't.
No. Mine has been a very meandering path. I had 4 majors as an undergraduate. I finished one of them, but I did start as physics. Then I thought I would teach middle school science. Turns out, no, middle school people, those are hormones with feet. So every middle school educator out there, thank you for what you do. You are special people. And then I thought I would do studio art. And then turns out I was too shy to do studio art. And so I was able to finish a classical studies degree, which is Greek and Roman history, literature, and archaeology. And
I had no idea. That was your first degree.
Right? And so there you go. That is not really applicable in the real world. So I went to the computer at the center at Dartmouth, and they're like, okay, you do this quiz and it tells you what you will do with the rest of your life. I'm like, oh, good. Thank you. Someone's going to tell me. And so I answered all the questions to the best of my ability. And it was like, you should go into advertising or you should be a beekeeper. Okay, they really should have asked if you're allergic to bees. Yeah. So
Important.
I went to New York City and I went into advertising, and I was on the Hasbro account. And so I brought back Fuzzy Pumper, Barbershop, and Wonder World.
Oh, my.
So, yeah.
You know, I go to the toy fair every year.
I, in fact, ran all over New York City looking for a perfect pink princess dress for one of the actresses for Toy Fair. So there is a certainly special place in my heart for Toy Fair. Feelings.
I've taken my husband the past 2 years, and after a day and a half, he's like, okay, can we go now?
Right.
Can we leave now? And I go to support one of my clients. So I don't necessarily have to be there, but now that I'm just close to New York, I'm like, yes, I'll be there. Give me my badge. I'll be there every day.
Yeah, when you're running around New York looking for the pink dress, it's that's a something.
Okay, so then how do you move forward, and how do you end up?
So toy
with EDL?
advertising, what I didn't love about toy advertising was that I was essentially lying to little kids. Like, what can I get away with that will get through legal and still make these kids think that they need this toy that they don't really need?
Yeah.
And there were some practices where you would know how much the shoot was going to cost, but you would tell the client it was going to cost this amount. You'd get them to sign off on the rest at the shoot, and that didn't really sit well with me. And, you can't really live in New York without a job. Mm-hmm. So when I left that job, I had to leave New York City. So I came back to Connecticut to be a caregiver. My mom's health was failing, and I was walking dogs, working at a mall science store and a bookstore, framing pictures, and substitute teaching. And I loved substitute teaching. I'm like, well, this is weird. And I was like, well, what do you do when you don't know what to do? You go to grad school. So I was taking genetics and organic chemistry, and I loved organic chemistry. And I'm like, oh, wait, most people don't love organic chemistry. So I was like, all right, let's put these two together. So then I was full-time at Sacred Heart and full-time at Southern to get the chemistry credits that I didn't have in my undergrad to become a chemistry teacher. Wow. And then before the ink was dry on my dissertation, because my heart is in Bridgeport and I wanted to do more for Bridgeport schools, so I wanted to lead. So I got my doctorate, and while the ink was still wet, they're like, well, would you teach research methods? And I'm like, well, can I still do this and do that? And they're like, well, yeah, for now. And then the for now ended. And so then I had to decide, like, what do I want to do? Like, and I was like, well, I have a bigger impact working at a state university. Helping schools get better leaders, I can help more kids than just have my own school. So that's how that happened.
What an interesting path.
Wondering.
Well, and there is some sort of meandering kind of path that everybody that we've talked to has kind of taken to get to, everybody, says, well, hey, this is not where I expected to be at this point, particularly when I was an undergrad. Like, I didn't think that this is where I was going.
Yeah.
That's definitely a common path, because I never thought I would be a professor.
No.
It was not my goal was to be president of an advertising agency. And that didn't happen. The first time I worked at an ad agency for 2 years, and within a year, I was like, this is not what I want.
Yes, sister. Mm-hmm.
Well, and as an undergraduate, I was all in on public relations. And I got my first job in public relations, and I felt the same way. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not what I was expecting. This is not, I can't do this. Like, I was
on the super bright white paper. So it could be reproduced.
Yeah, yeah, right. I just could not. I was so anxious all the time. I was like a bundle of nerves all the time, and I was like, I can't live. I need to figure out something else. And luckily, at that point, that's when I, because it was desktop publishing was new, so I was able to get in on, because I didn't have anything else to do. I was just practicing, at that time it was
Quark Express.
Quark.
You gotta love Quark.
I love Quark.
But before that, PageMaker.
Okay.
So that was even, that was a little bit before Quark, but Quark took over. And that's Quark is what I got through grad school with, doing freelance with Quark.
I try to explain students what Quark is, and they just don't.
No, bless their hearts.
And
unless you've experienced Quark, you don't know Quark.
Yeah, and it's gotten sort of the now that InDesign has become the Adobe kind of tries taking over everything, of course. And
well, I remember when I was in advertising, I would do each deck twice, because you would do it in Aldus Persuasion, and then you would do it in PowerPoint as well, because one printed well and one projected well.
Yes. Yeah. I liked Persuasion. And that got bought out, and then they killed it. Yep. And the same thing happened with PageMaker, right?
It was killed.
Yeah, because that was Adobe bought it.
Yeah, just like Fireworks. I don't know if you ever used Fireworks.
Yeah, oh yeah, I did. Yeah,
yeah. As soon as Photoshop started, gaining traction, Fireworks just
because they incorporated everything directly into that. So. Well, hey, that took an interesting tech turn for a second there.
But I love how you try so many things and did so many things, and we always want to remind students that it's
just
okay.
as my Duolingo friend.
I do love our duo friendship. No, but we always like to remind students that it's okay to try different things, and it's okay if you're trying to figure out a different path, or if undergraduate and graduate school look different.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's gonna happen in 5 years.
Advertising is so stinking helpful to teaching chemistry, because a lot of my chemists had wanted to sign up for keyboarding, and there was no room in keyboarding, so their guidance counselor put them in chemistry because, like, those are the same. No. So I was using all my marketing skills to get them invested in chemistry. And honestly, sometimes in educational leadership, like, you are drawing on these same skills. Marketing and leadership are not that different. Inspire a shared vision. Thank you, Kouzes and Posner. But inspire a shared vision is marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, I think that's also something that I had, you know, I take for granted a little bit, is that, you know, just where those sorts of experiences and the early experiences like sort of raise up at weird times. Right. You know, and I just think about, like, you know, as being a department chair and like some of the things that I have to do to kind of build consensus and that kind of stuff within just within the department, not necessarily to the broader, but just trying to say, okay, well, you know, here's a direction that I think we should go. How can I like frame this in a way that's going to make sense to everybody? Like, I think that this is a good decision, and I have to, you know, get everybody else to agree to that. Well, you know, it's not as simple as just saying, here's the facts. You have to, you know, and that's something that you know, I didn't even realize that that background that I had became something that is very much a part of my daily practice.
Sure.
Right. And just trying to, you know, sort of build enthusiasm for the things that we are trying to do. Right. Like, I'm, you know, oh yeah, you know, budget cuts, all these kinds of things, but look at the great work that we're doing, you know,
Right.
And that's going back to my undergraduate experiences and like how I, you know, learned about, you know, just persuading people, being, you know, just being, having a clear sense of direction for the message, right? And then trying to convey that. And it just pops up every once in a while. And you know, until this moment, I really didn't make that so that's why
calling that a win.
Yeah, no, but you know, that's also something that I really appreciate about our podcast, is that like every time that we have a conversation, and I think we've said this before.
Wait, it's not new for me?
Well, it's new it's for me. Like, I'm like excited when I make a discovery.
Revelations.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And that's, you know, that speaks to the quality of our guests, I think.
Oh, good spin.
Yeah. See, it comes up every once in a while, right?
But people don't usually call it out.
That's right. Yeah. When you do, then you're a hack. You know, so. You know, I'm going to shift our direction just a little bit, because I do want to go back to the AI thing.
I was just going to do that. You read my mind.
There we go.
I was going to be a little bit more blunt about it.
Yeah. Okay. But, you know, one of the things that you know, there's so much conversation everywhere about AI, but in education in particular, I mean, and you know, I think some of the discussion that's about it is, you know, getting lost in the idea of, you know, you know, how are we dealing with authentic student work?
Sure.
How are we dealing with copyright issues? All these kinds of things, and I think that there's a lot of, you know, looking at the trees instead of the forest kind of.
But it's not even looking at a tree. So
right.
when I started the conversations around artificial intelligence, and the Office of Faculty Development sponsored some conversations around it, and so I'm grateful to them. But also we have an affinity group that has been right from the outset exploring different tools and playing with it. I know you guys have had Lauren Tucker on the podcast, and she was instrumental in setting that up. But I actually have 2 articles out for peer review right now on this. I really think that artificial intelligence needs to shift the way we're thinking about this. If we don't tell our students explicitly why we want them to do this task, why wouldn't they outsource it to artificial intelligence?
Absolutely.
If we don't build the relationships so they actually care and know that we care and want to hear what they actually have to say, why wouldn't they outsource it? So if we focus on building relationships and being transparent about our intentionality, why these tasks matter, then the conversation shifts away from cheating and academic integrity to I care about you and this is why this task is beneficial to you. Please complete this task as you.
Right.
And then I think it shifts the perspective on the students about seeing AI more just as an extra tool.
Absolutely.
Rather than, oh, this is going to do the work for me. No, this is just something extra, like I use PowerPoint or Gamma.
And you craft the prompt to say, and highlight what you're changing and explain it, because I want to learn why you're making these grammatical edits. Use AI to fix the grammar, that's fine. You know, I really don't feel good that ending sentences with prepositions is becoming okay, right? Our grammar is changing. So if I encourage my students to pay attention to prepositional precedence, yeah, I'm okay with that. Like, please don't end a sentence with a preposition. And if you need help with that, ask artificial intelligence to help you with that, you know?
Sure. Well, you know, and I think that's, you know, it's the other thing that I kind of ran across in a discussion this past week was, you know, the students using artificial intelligence to do assignments and that sort of thing, or not, or just even so. Well, let me give you the scenario.
Okay.
A student, you know, does some work and doesn't pay attention to the instructions, right?
No.
And
Never happens.
Right. No, never happens. Right. But in this sort of instance, they're just you know, sort of blindly entering in things in artificial intelligence and you know, maybe changing a couple of words, and then the artificial intelligence gives them, you know, a completely bogus answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the one example was it was a response to a reading about typography, and they
when you say typography, you mean like fonts
and
stuff?
stuff, right? So I don't know what the student had entered in for the AI, but the response was all about texture.
Well, okay, but you know, Garamond gives you a different textural feel than Calibri.
So I wasn't sure what the student had entered in, but like it was completely off. And so, you know, I was, you know, like raging through the office, like, oh my God, you know, I can't believe this happened, blah, blah, blah. And then talking to colleagues in the department, like, you know, what came out of the conversation was that employers are looking for the things that they want at that particular moment, right? So if a student isn't able to give them what they want, follow the directions or respond to that, then why wouldn't an employer just use AI instead? Because they're going to get exactly what they want.
No,
it might not be the...
No, because if I ask for a leader in artificial intelligence, it's going to give me a picture, no offense, of you, a white man with gray hair and glasses.
Right.
Like, even with glasses, it has the...
Yeah,
so,
right.
I mean, no, you need the human in the loop, and...
I agree, but that's not what I think is the mentality at this point is all about efficiencies and that sort of thing. And I think that for administrative tasks, you know, AI can like, you know, what it does is actually like does things to the letter, right? Of what, you know, and if you don't want to
program it to,
right?
Because if you program it, not like you have to essentially turn down its creativity to get it to follow the instructions to the letter.
Right. And the other thing, which is also like a, you know, sort of a management kind of issue is, you know, you're giving feedback to it or saying, okay, this doesn't fit, change this. AI doesn't complain, right? It doesn't, you know, push
Actually,
back.
it does. I asked a political question at the beginning of the year, and they told me that they were not going to do it.
But if you ask it differently and you spin it a little, you can get it to answer it.
I tried revising my prompt like 3 or 4 times, and he wouldn't do it. He kept telling me like it was ChatGPT. He kept telling me I can't do this. I have to be like partial. I can't show preference. And eventually I was like, okay, whatever. This was just an exercise to see if I could get you to tell me what I wanted to hear.
Right.
And I haven't tried it again. But it is very true. It doesn't argue with you.
And that, to somebody that is like a non-reflexive manager, like they're not thinking about these things. They just want to get the job done, or they want what they want when they want it. They're going to pick that tool because there's a lot less investment in that than there is to train somebody that, to deal with the ego, to, make sure that they're following directions and showing up to work on time and all these kinds of things, which our students, our undergraduate students in particular, they're trying to figure this stuff out, right? So, it's, so I think it's a dilemma for, the work environment that they're moving into, because it's a pressure that's not just competing against other students, but competing for the humanity in the position, right?
Yes, and AI has passed the Turing test.
Yes.
And so, the Turing test was if I have a machine and a person behind a wall and they're just interacting with me via text, can I, as a third party, distinguish between them? And there have been studies that if you give ChatGPT or Llama or Bard a personality and you tell it sort of to be this person and you give them a persona, that the person on the other side of the wall can't tell the difference between the artificial intelligence and the person. So the artificial intelligence has passed the Turing test, but we've also been using it for years and years and years. It just became more obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that's marketing.
It's how I explain it to
yeah.
the students too, because I have students, I teach AI in my classes on the creative side. And I do have students that push back and tell me, I don't like this. I feel like this is taking my creativity and it's taking my own style. I'm like, but we're not using it to design for you. We're only using it for certain things. So thinking about AI in Photoshop, how you can now just write a prompt and be like, can you add a bird in the sky? Or I have this picture that is 5x7, but I need it to be 6x8. Can you complete the borders? For them, this is new, but they don't understand that removing the background with one click, that's AI.
Oh,
and that has been around for years.
Well, even my little red underline that tells me that I fat finger on the word there every time I type it. Right. And Clippy, I miss you, Clippy.
Yeah,
it looks like you're writing a business letter.
But
Can I help you with that?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's been around for a long time. Even just thinking about Photoshop, if we're talking about like the magic wand tool, which picks colors, right? That was functionally AI, right? Pick all of the pixels that have a similar color. Yeah. Okay, well, that's what it's. So it's been around for quite a while. It's
the
just
1950s.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But I think that's one of the things that we're sort of dealing with right now is that before it was just instrumental tool, and now, like you're saying, we're injecting the possibility of it having a personality, right? And having an interface that is going to respond to us.
Indistinguishable.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's part of the problem or caution, and one of the things that I ran into, because I've been doing some stuff with role-playing games and that kind of stuff. And, I was asking it for a scenario that had, like this invasion in an imaginary context and all that kind of stuff. And it said, oh yeah, I can help you with that. And I gave it like the storyline, and it said, okay, well, I'll give you a map and it'll be interactive and all this kind of stuff. And, all you have to do is, is this something that you would want me to do? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Like, give me that stuff. That's great. It'll give me a template and all that kind of stuff. And then it said, okay, well, all you have to do is like tell me, where to upload set up a Google Drive, and I'll upload it to that and everything. And it didn't come. So I said, hey, weren't you supposed to send me this thing? And it said, oh yeah, sorry. Like, just to clarify, this is what I'm going to send you. And, and if you need this, so then, it says, okay, well, here's another alternative. You can wait for me to send this to your Google Drive, or you could click on these links, and these links will take you directly to the template that I created. Click on the links, and it takes me to a page that says, there's no such page. Like it just says that nothing exists, right? So then I said, hey, are you giving me suggestions that you can't do? And I said, yeah, absolutely. It's right that you're frustrated. And no, I can't do that at all. I can't do any of the things that I told you that I could do. So it is absolutely fallible.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, even on basic things, like if you ask it for multiple choice questions and then select the correct response and explain the answer, I asked it to create the questions, and then I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that doesn't look right. And I'm like, can you check number 29? They're like, oh, yeah, that was a mistake. You're right. It should have been C. And then it explained why it was wrong before.
Which is crazy. I mean, there's lots of other anecdotes that I can share because I've been poking around with this for quite a long time. But unfortunately, I think we're out of time.
Yeah, we are out of time.
We're out of time.
I have so many more things that I want to ask.
I know that we were just getting going. But Jess, thank you so much for being such a great guest. Lots and lots to talk about, and I hope that we can have more conversations because I think there's a lot of overlap between interests and I'd love to hear more about what's going on in the graduate program because I get a little bit from Melanie, but I would love to talk more about that. But thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. And just for our repeat listeners, we do accept topics and suggestions for future conversations, especially going into season 2 at creativejpodcast@gmail.com. I think I got it right that time.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I haven't memorized it.
Yeah. So.
No, it's not on the sign either.
Maybe that's an opportunity.
Well, that's missed opportunity. Yes, that's right. But thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Jess, for coming.
Thanks.
Creative Journeys is a podcast produced at Southern Connecticut State University by faculty, students, and staff who are interested in exploring our creative potential.